Remember this guy?
I feel raped. That's how I feel. Raped, frightened, and sad.
That's Dr. Howard Borstein, who was Donald Trump's personal physician for 39 years. In 2015, he wrote a letter attesting to the superiority of Donald Trump's health and wellness. In it, he wrote, "I've been the personal physician of Mr. Donald J. Trump since 1980. Mr. Trump has no significant medical problems. Mr. Trump has had a recent complete medical examination that showed only positive results." To those future physicians among you, typically when you have a patient get medical tests and the results are positive, that's a bad thing. To continue, he suffered no form of cancer, has never had any hip, knee, or shoulder replacement, or any other orthopedic surgery, which potentially undermines the whole idea that Donald had bone spurs so severe that it prevented him from serving his country during Vietnam. If elected, I can state unequivocally, Mr. Trump will be the healthiest individual ever elected to the presidency, which is totally a thing we can test. I mean, we all knew it was bullshit at the time, and it was kind of funny. But because Borstein's letter was so odd and over the top, it covered over the fact that we actually never got to know anything about Donald's actual physical health. No test results were ever released, positive, negative, or otherwise. And then we find out that the reason the letter was so weird and hyperbolic is because Donald dictated it to Dr. Borstein. And then, of course, it got even weirder.
Breaking news, CNN learning exclusively tonight that President Trump dictated that letter, that infamous letter from his lawyer on his health. Remember, his lawyer, we usually talk about lawyers on this program, his doctor on his health. It was back in 2015. Now, this is according to his former personal doctor, Harold Bornstein. This comes as Bornstein is also claiming tonight that Trump's former bodyguard and a lawyer raided his office for the president's medical records.
There's nothing suspicious in that at all. I mean, who among us has not sent bodyguards to our doctor's offices to seize our medical files? I mean, it's not like Donald was trying to hide anything, right? He totally deserves the benefit of the doubt. And then there's this guy. That's Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who served as the White House doctor under both the Obama and Trump administrations. He had a reputation for handing out such massive quantities of sedatives and stimulants to White House staff without prescription that he became known as Dr. Feelgood and the Candyman. His behavior was so egregious and included actually drinking to excess on the job, which, by the way, if you are the physician of the President of the United States, is probably not the most responsible thing to do.
A scathing new report characterizes former White House physician Dr. Ronnie Jackson as a verbally abusive boss and as careless with substance use while on duty. The report, released today by the Defense Department's Inspector General, alleges Jackson, while serving as White House physician under Presidents Trump and Obama, routinely screamed at subordinates, intimidated and belittled them, sometimes calling them idiots, lazy effers, and mother effers, and that he made sexual and denigrating comments about a female subordinate.
He was demoted from admiral to captain. But of course, because he's a Republican, and Republicans are now allowed to fail up all the time, he was elected to Congress in 2020. Thanks, Texas. Really appreciate it. Jackson now is one of Donald's most sycophantic, loyal MAGA extremist supporters. Here, though, is Jackson back in, I believe it was 2018, when he was still the White House physician, discussing the results of Donald's annual physical. And specifically in this clip, he's talking about the cognitive test Donald took?
We picked one of the ones that was a little bit more involved. It was longer. It was the more difficult one of all of them. It took significantly longer to complete, but the president did exceedingly well on it. So that was not driven at all by any clinical concerns I have. It was driven by the president's wishes, and he did well on it.
The test Jackson is referring to is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, and he describes it as being more involved, more difficult, and much longer and needing more time to administer than comparative tests. I think all of those descriptions are arguable. First of all, a couple of the tasks include copying a cube and drawing a clock face that reads 10 minutes after 11. Also, it takes about 10 minutes to administer. Then, when it comes to Donald's physical health, here's what Jackson had to say.
And I think I first noticed that, we traveled, did some overseas travel last year. And I was really surprised because I didn't know the president early on. When the days we'd get these 14, 16-hour days, and the staff is just spent after a while, and you're just like, man, when are we going to the hotel? When are we going down? Because you have all the issues of different time zones and things of that nature too. And I'll tell you, out of everybody there, the president had more stamina and more energy than just about anybody there. And he was the one that was always like, we're not going to skip this event. We're not going to skip this. We're going to do this. We're going to do that, and stuck to the schedule despite the urging of some of us to let's just forget the rest of the day.
Can you explain to me how a guy who eats McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicks and all those Diet Cokes and who never exercises is in as good a shape as you say he's in?
It's called genetics. I don't know. It's some people have just great genes. I told the president that if he had a healthier diet over the last 20 years, he might live to be 200 years old. I don't know. I mean, he has incredible genes. I just assume. I mean, if I didn't watch what I ate, I wouldn't have in the cardiac and overall health that he has. So
there's literally no reason to think that either Borstein or Jackson is a reliable source of information. Borstein never released any results of any medical tests that he gave. And again, he let his patient dictate his own letter about his physical state. Jackson's a straight up MAGA loyalist. And we know that a lot of lying was done about Donald's health while he was in the White House. You may remember he had a very severe case of COVID, and it's extremely likely that anybody else who was as sick as he was would have died without the kinds of world-class medical treatment Donald had access to. Fast forward to last week when we learned that Donald will not be releasing his medical records. It shouldn't surprise any of us that this guy is reluctant to share with the world how he did on his annual physical. And this is just the physical stuff. I think it's highly unlikely that Donald will ever submit to taking any kind of exam like the Montreal Cognitive Assessment because his cognitive decline has been quite obvious over the last few years. So yes, he took it. When he took it 6 years ago, he passed with flying colors, which basically meant that he was correctly able to identify a camel. But we still have no information about a guy who drinks 12 Diet Coke today, subsists on McDonald's and Kentucky Fried Chicken, doesn't exercise. And I'm really sorry, but even if you play 2 rounds of golf every day, if you're driving around the course on a golf cart, that does not count. He sleeps 4 hours a night, and even with makeup on, he looks like a deeply unhealthy person. So it would be great if we could get some information about an almost 79-year-old man who is the oldest person ever in American history to run for the presidency. Let's face it, the actuarial tables are against him. He's under enormous amount of stress. His lifestyle is deeply unhealthy. There is a good question about whether or not he would be able to complete a term. And what happens if he doesn't? Yep, we get President J.D. Vance, an outcome that should send chills down everybody's spine. So please, let's make sure that that does not happen.